A neurosurgeon, exhausted after a 12-hour shift at the hospital, has his routine shattered when he's abruptly pulled aside by a street florist. Desperate, she begs him to pretend to be her boyfriend, claiming she's being followed by her ex. The doctor agrees to help, only to be horrified when he recognizes the pursuer. It's his own older brother, a married businessman and father. If this story has you hooked, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue! I promise, this will be the best story you'll hear all year. The wail of an ambulance still echoed in Dr. Benjamin Ben Reed's ears as he walked, exhausted, through the streets of Manhattan. A 12-hour shift at Mount Sinai Hospital had drained him completely. The emergency neurosurgery he had performed that afternoon was especially grueling. A young man with severe head trauma after a motorcycle accident. Ben had managed to stabilize him, but he knew the next 48 hours would be decisive. The late afternoon sky was painting itself orange over the East River as he decided to take an alternate route home, avoiding the chaotic traffic on the FDR Drive. It was then that he felt someone grab his arm forcefully. "Please help me!" A female voice, trembling and desperate, made Ben spin around. Before him stood a young woman of about 30, her curly hair pulled into a messy bun, her brown eyes wide with panic. She was clutching a partially crushed bouquet of sunflowers, and her breathing was rapid, as if she had been running. "I need you to pretend to be my boyfriend. Right now. Please," she pleaded, looking nervously over her shoulder. "There's a man who's been following me for 3 blocks, my ex. He won't accept that it's over." Ben, still stunned by the sudden approach, barely had time to process the request before the woman linked her arm through his and forced a tense smile, as if they were a couple. "My name is Eliza Hayes. Just walk with me for a minute, please. I swear I'm not crazy." Something in her eyes, a mix of genuine desperation and vulnerability, made the doctor nod. After all, he had sworn an oath to help people in danger. "All right," he replied quietly. "I'm Ben." As they walked together down the tree-lined sidewalk of Lexington Avenue, Ben noticed a man in a navy blue suit approaching with decisive steps. The doctor felt Eliza squeeze his arm tighter. "That's him," she whispered. Ben looked at the man and felt his heart skip a beat. Under the golden light of the Manhattan dusk, he immediately recognized that face. It was Arthur Reed, his older brother, a real estate mogul. Arthur was 10 years older than Ben. Married for over 15 years to Catherine, he had a 12-year-old son, Peter. He was considered the prime example of success in the Reed family, a man who had transformed their father's small business into one of the largest developers on the East Coast. For a moment, Ben considered pulling his arm away from Eliza and clearing up the misunderstanding. There had to be some explanation. His brother was a respected man, known for his generosity to charities and his solid marriage to Catherine. But before he could decide, Arthur was standing in front of them. His gaze shifted from surprise to irritation as he recognized his brother standing next to Eliza. "Benjamin?" Arthur's tone carried a mix of astonishment and something the doctor couldn't quite decipher. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Ben replied, instinctively positioning himself slightly in front of Eliza. "I didn't expect to see you on this side of town." Arthur's eyes narrowed, fixed on Eliza, who held his gaze with visible discomfort. "Do you two know each other?" the businessman asked, his voice now laced with a false casualness. Ben hesitated for a second, but something in his brother's threatening posture made him decide. "Yes," he answered, sliding his arm around Eliza's waist. "We've been seeing each other for a few weeks." A dense silence settled between the three of them. Arthur adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. "Interesting, very interesting." Arthur forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I needed to speak with Eliza about a landscaping project for the new development. She did exceptional work on the Orion building." The lie was so transparent that Ben felt a wave of disappointment and anger rise within him. "I believe any professional matters can be handled during business hours at the office," Ben countered, maintaining the composure taught by years of emergency situations at the hospital. Arthur shot a hard look at Eliza, who remained silent, clutching the bouquet of sunflowers as if it were a shield. "Of course, you're right." Arthur took a step back. "It was just a coincidence finding her here. We'll talk another time, Eliza." His tone carried a veiled threat that did not go unnoticed by Ben. "Actually," Ben interrupted, "Eliza is quite busy for the next few weeks. If the matter is urgent, I suggest you speak with another professional." The brothers stared at each other for a long moment, A silent duel that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken truths. I see. Arthur finally backed down. I'll see you at Sunday lunch at Mom's place then? I'll be there, Ben answered curtly. With one last look at Eliza, Arthur turned and disappeared into the crowd on the busy street. Only when his brother was long gone did Ben feel Eliza exhale, as if she had been holding her breath the entire time. She stepped away from him, trembling slightly. You know him. It wasn't a question, but a statement filled with disbelief. You have the same last name. Are you related? He's my older brother, Ben confirmed, still processing what had just happened. Arthur Reed. Eliza turned pale, her eyes filling with unshed tears. Oh my God, she murmured, covering her mouth with her hand. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Ben guided her to a nearby bench along the riverwalk, away from the curious glances of passers-by. The sun was already setting over the South Street seaport, painting the historic buildings in an orange light that contrasted with the gravity of the moment. Tell me everything, he requested, using the same calm voice he used to deliver difficult news to patients' families. Eliza took a deep breath, clutching the sunflowers so tightly that a few petals fell onto her lap. I met your brother 3 months ago, when I was hired to do the floral arrangements for the opening of one of his company's new buildings, she began. He told me he was separating, that he was only living with his wife for appearances. He invited me to dinner, and I believed him. A tear rolled down her cheek. At first, it was just work. Then came the gifts, the discreet meetings. He never took me to public places here in New York, always saying it was to protect me from gossip that could hurt my flower shop. Ben listened in silence, trying to reconcile the image of his exemplary brother with the man Eliza was describing. 2 weeks ago, I was at the mall and I saw your brother with a woman and a boy, clearly on a family outing. The woman called him Honey. The boy called him Dad. There was no way to pretend it was just for appearances. Catherine and Peter, Ben murmured. I confronted him that night. He admitted he was still married, that he had never planned to get a divorce. He said I should understand that men like him have needs. I ended things right there. Eliza wiped her tears with the sleeve of her blouse. Since then, he hasn't left me alone. He shows up at my shop, calls me from blocked numbers, follows me. Today was the 3rd time this week. The sun had completely disappeared, and the city lights began to twinkle around them. On the bridge, cars formed an endless line, their headlights like metallic fireflies in the arriving night. Ben tried to absorb every word, feeling the weight of a truth that threatened to demolish the image he had of his brother, and perhaps his entire family. I'm taking you home, he said finally. And tomorrow, we're going to sort this out. Night fell completely over the city as Ben drove in silence. Beside him, Eliza looked out the window, her fingers still nervously intertwined with the stems of the wilting sunflowers. Turn right at the next corner, she indicated, her voice almost a whisper. It's that green building with the white gate. The Sunflower Flower Shop occupied the ground floor of an old brownstone in the East Village. A small apartment on the floor above served as Eliza's home. It wasn't luxurious, but it had character. Potted plants hung from the windows, and a discreet wooden sign indicated the business. Do you live alone? Ben asked, parking the car. Yes, she replied, hesitant to get out. But don't worry. I have a neighbor who always keeps an eye out, Mrs. Petrov, a retired lady who has practically adopted my shop as an extension of her own home. Ben nodded. But something in his medical instinct, the same one that alerted him when a patient needed special attention, made him get out of the car and walk her to the door. You have my number now, he said, handing her a card. Anything at all, don't hesitate to call. And tomorrow I'm going to talk to my brother. Eliza held the card as if it were precious. Thank you, Dr. Reed. I'm so sorry for dragging you into this. If I had known... Don't blame yourself, he interrupted. You did nothing wrong. When Ben got back to his car, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Arthur. We need to talk. Urgent. That woman is not who you think she is. Followed by another. She's dangerous, Ben. A con artist. She's done this to other men. She threatened my family. Please, call me. Ben felt his blood boil. His brother's hypocrisy was so blatant it was absurd. He decided not to reply immediately. He needed time to organize his thoughts and not act on impulse. The next morning, after a restless night, Ben arrived at the hospital earlier than usual. He focused on his patients, mentally thankful for the demanding routine that kept him from ruminating on the previous day's events. During his lunch break, he received a new message, this time from Eliza. "Dr. Reed, your brother showed up at the flower shop today. When I refused to serve him, he started screaming in front of customers, saying I had tricked him and stolen money from him. I'm scared." Attached to the message was a photo of the shop with table arrangements knocked over and petals scattered across the floor. Ben's heart pounded. This was no longer just an extramarital affair. It was harassment, intimidation. He tried calling Eliza, but she didn't answer. He sent a message asking her to stay somewhere safe and promising to stop by the shop as soon as his shift ended. At 6 p.m., when he finally left the hospital, Ben drove straight to the East Village. He found the flower shop closed, the blinds pulled down. He knocked several times, calling for Eliza, until an elderly woman came out of the neighboring building. "Are you looking for Eliza?" asked Mrs. Petrov, adjusting her glasses to get a better look at him. "Yes, I'm a friend of hers. Ben Reed." The mention of the last name made the woman's expression harden. "Reed, huh? Related to that man who came here this morning, making that awful scene?" "Unfortunately, yes. He's my brother," Ben admitted. "But I'm here to help Eliza, not cause problems." Mrs. Petrov studied him for a few seconds before deciding to trust him. "She left," the woman revealed, lowering her voice as if sharing a state secret. "Closed the shop, grabbed a suitcase, and said she needed to get out of the city for a while. Asked me to water the plants and cancel her pending orders." Ben felt a tightness in his chest. "Did she say where she was going? Or when she'd be back?" "No, dear. Just said she needed distance to feel safe again." I've never seen the girl like that. Eyes all swollen from crying, shaking like a leaf. At that moment, Ben's phone buzzed with a message from Eliza. "I'm at the bus terminal. I'm going to my aunt's house in Philadelphia. I need time away from here. Your brother is spreading lies about me, saying I'm a con artist. I'm afraid this will permanently damage my business. Thank you for your help yesterday. You were a gentleman at a time when I really needed one." Without a second thought, Ben got in his car and drove to the Port Authority bus terminal. The place was chaotic, as it always was in the early evening. He searched through the crowd until he spotted Eliza, sitting alone on a bench near a boarding gate, a small suitcase at her feet. Seeing him approach, she stood up, surprised. "Dr. Reed, what are you doing here?" "I couldn't let you leave like this," he replied. "This situation, it's not fair that you have to abandon your life because of my brother's behavior." Eliza smiled sadly, readjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. "It's just for a little while. I need things to cool down. Your brother has connections, influence. People believe him, not me. I'm just the florist, the woman who supposedly tried to destroy a marriage." An announcement crackled over the speakers, informing that the bus to Philadelphia would be departing in 15 minutes. "I'll sue my brother if I have to," Ben said, determined. "What he's doing is a crime." "No," Eliza shook her head vehemently. "Please don't do that. It would only make everything worse. I just want peace, to move on with my life." She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "There's one more thing you need to know," she continued, her voice now almost inaudible amid the terminal's bustle. "Your brother, when I found out he was married, that he had a son, I didn't know it was your nephew." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "I ended it immediately. I would never be with a married man. If I had known from the beginning..." She paused, fighting the emotion. "Please, if you ever see his wife, Catherine, right? Tell her I didn't know, that I never wanted to hurt her or her son." The final boarding call sounded, and Eliza picked up her bag. "I have to go. Thank you for everything, Dr. Reed." "Call me Ben," he replied, feeling strangely connected to this woman he had known for less than 24 hours. "And please, let me know when you arrive safely." She nodded, and for a brief moment, their eyes met, a look heavy with possibilities that might never be realized. Then, she turned and walked toward the bus. Ben remained motionless, watching the bus pull away, carrying Eliza far from the mess his brother had created. A cold, calculated anger began to build inside him. It was no longer just about Arthur's lie to Eliza. It was about years of blind admiration for a man who didn't deserve it. He drove to his brother's luxurious penthouse on Park Avenue without calling first. The mansion, with its impeccable gardens and illuminated swimming pool, seemed to mock the simplicity of Eliza's flower shop. He rang the bell and was met by a housekeeper who recognized him immediately. "Dr. Reed, what a surprise. Mr. Arthur is in his study. I'll let him know you're here." "That won't be necessary," he replied, already walking into the house. "I know the way." He found Arthur sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, speaking on the phone. Upon seeing his brother, the businessman quickly ended the call. "Ben, I was just trying to reach you. We need to clear up this misunderstanding." "There's nothing to clear up," Ben interrupted, closing the study door behind him. "I know exactly who you are now." Arthur stood, walking around the desk to face his brother. "You don't understand. That woman is dangerous. She's tried to extort money from other men." "She's a manipulator! Stop it!" Ben's voice echoed in the study. "She's gone, Arthur. She left the city because of you. Her business, her life, all destroyed by your lies." Arthur paled slightly but maintained his defensive posture. "It's better this way. She needed to be out of our lives. She could have caused irreparable damage to our family." "Our family?" Ben laughed, disbelieving. "The only threat to your family is you, Arthur. Your infidelity, your lies." The tension between the brothers was palpable when the study door opened. Catherine entered, elegant as always in her navy blue dress, her black hair perfectly styled, contrasting with the paleness of her face. "Ben, what a surprise. I didn't know you were visiting us today." She looked from one brother to the other, immediately sensing the hostility in the air. Did something happen? Ben stared at his brother, giving him one last chance to redeem himself, to tell the truth. But Arthur just returned the challenging gaze. The silence hanging in the study was almost tangible. Ben looked at Catherine, the sister-in-law he had always admired for her elegance and intelligence, and felt the weight of the truth he was about to reveal. "Yes, Catherine, something has happened that you need to know," Ben said, ignoring Arthur's warning glare. "Ben, don't," Arthur started, taking a step toward him. "Don't what, Arthur? Don't tell your wife you've been cheating on her? That you harassed an innocent woman until you forced her to leave the city?" Catherine looked confusedly between them, her cordial smile slowly fading. "What are you talking about, Ben? Arthur, what is going on?" Arthur ran a hand through his graying hair, a calculating expression taking over his face. "Catherine, darling, Ben met a woman who fabricated an absurd story about me. A con artist who has already tried to extort money from several businessmen in New York." Ben couldn't believe how easily his brother lied. "That's a lie!" he exclaimed, turning to Catherine. "Yesterday, by chance, I met a woman named Eliza Hayes. She was being stalked by a man, her ex-boyfriend. To my surprise, that man was Arthur." Catherine's eyes widened. "Your brother carried on a relationship with her for 3 months," Ben continued, determined to expose the entire truth. "He made Eliza believe he was separating from you, that your marriage was just for show. When she discovered the truth that he was married and had a son, she ended everything. Since then, Arthur has been harassing her, intimidating her. Today, he went to her flower shop, destroyed arrangements, and publicly slandered her." Catherine remained motionless, her face a mask of shock. "Because of that," Ben concluded, "Eliza left the city today. She abandoned her business, her home, everything, out of fear of your husband." Arthur let out a forced laugh. "This is ridiculous. Catherine, you've known me for 15 years. Do you really think I would do something like that? It's obvious this woman manipulated my brother, just as she tried to manipulate me when I rejected her." Ben shook his head, incredulous. "Catherine, I saw it with my own eyes. Arthur stalking Eliza on the street. The way he looked at her, threateningly. The messages he sent me afterward, trying to defame her. And today, the vandalism at her shop." There was a moment of tense silence as Catherine processed everything she was hearing. Then, to Ben's surprise, she walked slowly over to Arthur and took his hand. "You're being unfair to your brother, Ben," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "Arthur told me about this woman weeks ago. She approached him at a company event, offered landscaping services, and then began making advances. When he rejected her, she started inventing stories, threatening our family." Ben couldn't believe what he was hearing. "This is absurd. You believe him just like that without question?" "Why wouldn't I? He's my husband, the father of my child, a man respected throughout New York," Catherine replied, lifting her chin in a defiant gesture. "You, on the other hand, Ben, have always been easily manipulated, always seeing the best in people, even when there's nothing good to see." Arthur smiled, triumphant. "You should apologize, brother. To Catherine, to me, to our family. This woman almost got what she wanted, to tear us apart." Ben looked from one to the other, realizing the extent of Arthur's manipulation. It wasn't just Eliza he had deceived, it was the entire Reed family for years. "I can't believe you're serious, Catherine. I've known my brother for 35 years. I know when he's lying. And I've known my husband for 15 years, she retorted. I know what kind of man he is. A man who built an empire from scratch, who donates to charity, who is respected by everyone. An exemplary father to Peter. And what about the messages he sent me? The customers who witnessed the scandal at the flower shop today? Arthur was just trying to protect you, to warn you about this woman. And as for the scene at the shop, I bet she staged it herself to frame him. Catherine's conviction was frightening. Ben realized it didn't matter what he said. She had chosen to believe her husband. I think you should leave, Ben, Arthur said, putting his arm around Catherine's waist. When you've calmed down, we can talk. I have nothing more to say to you, Ben replied, heading for the door. He stopped and looked at his sister-in-law. Catherine, if you ever want to know the truth, find me. The only truth I need to know is the one I live every day beside the man I love, she responded coldly. And please, don't come to Sunday lunch. I don't want Peter to see this. Disharmony between you. The words hit Ben like a punch to the gut. Being deprived of his nephew, whom he adored, was a blow he hadn't expected. As you wish, he said, leaving the study with what dignity he could muster. As he drove back to his apartment in Murray Hill, Ben tried to process everything that had happened. His brother's betrayal, Catherine's willful blindness, the injustice Eliza had suffered, and now the estrangement from his family. In the days that followed, the rift only deepened. Mrs. Reed, the brother's mother, called Ben, deeply disappointed. How could you accuse your brother like that, Ben? Destroy our family's harmony over the word of a stranger? Arthur is devastated. Mom, it wasn't like that. I don't want to hear it. You've always been jealous of your brother's success, always living in his shadow. But to invent something so horrible, I never thought you'd stoop so low. The conversation ended with Mrs. Reed demanding that Ben apologize to Arthur and Catherine if he ever wanted to be welcomed back into the family home, a condition he couldn't accept, not when he knew the truth. Weeks turned into months. Ben isolated himself at work, dedicating himself even more to his patients. Occasionally, he received messages from Eliza, who had settled in Philadelphia and was slowly starting to rebuild her life, opening a small flower stall in the Central Market. In one of those messages, she wrote, "Sometimes I think about coming back to New York. I miss my space, my customers, but then I remember the look in your brother's eyes, the impunity with which he acted, and the fear returns. It's like living in an invisible prison, Dr. Reed. I hope one day it passes." Ben wanted to tell her to come back, that he would protect her, that they would face Arthur together, but he knew it would be an empty promise. His own brother had orchestrated his isolation from the family with terrifying mastery. Christmas arrived, and it was the first time in 35 years that Ben didn't attend the Reed family's Christmas Eve dinner. Instead, he volunteered for a shift at the hospital, allowing colleagues with young children to spend the night with their families. It was during that shift that he met Maya, a newly hired nurse in the PICU, who had also opted to work on the holiday. Maya was the opposite of everything Ben had experienced in recent months. Sincere, direct, with no hidden agendas. They began to grow closer, first as colleagues, then as friends, and finally as something more. It was Maya who helped him accept the estrangement from his family, who convinced him that there were people who deserved his love and trust, despite his brother's betrayal. Your family chose to believe the version that caused them the least pain, she explained one night as they walked through Brooklyn Bridge Park. It's easier to think a stranger lied than to accept that someone we've loved for so long is capable of such cruelty. 3 years passed with almost no contact with the Reed family. Ben knew from hospital colleagues that his nephew, Peter, now 15, was growing up strong and healthy, that Arthur had expanded his business into the Southeast, that Catherine continued to be the perfect wife of the successful businessman. Eliza eventually stopped sending messages. The last one Ben received from her said she was moving to Chicago to start law school. "I want to help other women who've been through what I went through," she had written. "Thank you for being the only person in New York who believed me." Ben's life had found a new balance. His relationship with Maya had blossomed. They now lived together in his apartment, planning a future where the wounds of the past seemed increasingly distant. Until one Saturday morning before dawn, his phone rang. Catherine's number flashed on the screen. For a moment, Ben considered not answering. What right did she have to disturb him after so much time, after everything that had happened? But something, perhaps the doctor in him, accustomed to emergency calls, made him slide his finger across the screen. "Ben," Catherine's voice was unrecognizable, trembling and desperate. "Please, it's Peter. There was an accident. He's at Mount Sinai. The doctors say they need a neurosurgeon urgently." "They say you're the best." Ben's heart pounded. Peter, his nephew. What happened? "He was skateboarding with friends. He fell, hit his head. He's in a coma, Ben. Please, I know I have no right to ask you for anything after everything, but it's Peter." Catherine's voice broke into a sob. "I'm on my way now," Ben said, already getting out of bed under Maya's worried gaze. "Thank you," Catherine murmured. "Arthur is out of town at a meeting in D.C. I'm trying to reach him, but it doesn't matter. I'll take care of Peter." As he drove through the empty streets of Manhattan toward the hospital, Ben felt a whirlwind of emotions. Anger at his brother and sister-in-law for pushing him away from the family for years, fear for his nephew's condition, and a strange feeling that somehow fate was offering a chance at redemption, not for him who had always known the truth, but for those who had chosen to live in a lie. The lights of the Mount Sinai operating room had never seemed so intense to Ben. His hands, always steady during complex procedures, moved with pinpoint precision as he worked on Peter's brain. The teenager had suffered a severe traumatic brain injury with a subdural hematoma that needed to be contained immediately. "More suction here," Ben instructed the team, focused on the delicate operation. "We need total visibility of this area." For 6 hours, Ben fought to save his nephew's life, pushing aside all thoughts of the past, of Arthur, of the years of estrangement. In that moment, there was only the patient and the procedure, a precise dance between life and death that demanded his total concentration. When he finally closed Peter's skull and placed the last sutures, Ben felt the weight of exhaustion. It had been one of the most challenging surgeries of his career, not because of the technical complexity, but because of the emotional involvement. "Excellent work, Doctor," the surgical tech commented as she cleared the equipment. "That was a close one." Ben just nodded, pulling off his surgical mask. Yes, it had been close. If Catherine had hesitated a few more minutes to call him, if he had arrived later, if he didn't have experience with similar cases, so many variables that could have led to a tragic outcome. In the waiting room, Catherine was waiting, her face marked by hours of tears and anguish. Seeing Ben, she shot up from her chair. "How is he?" "The surgery was successful," Ben replied, maintaining the professional tone he used with patients' families. "We managed to stop the bleeding and reduce the intracranial pressure. Now we have to wait. The next 48 hours will be critical." Catherine covered her mouth with her hands, her shoulders shaking in a silent, relieved sob. "Thank you," she murmured, between sobs. "Thank you for coming, even after everything." "I wouldn't have done it for Arthur," Ben said honestly. "I did it for Peter. He's always been a good kid. It's not his fault what the adults around him chose to do." Catherine nodded, wiping her tears. "Arthur is on his way back from D.C. He caught the first flight. He should be here in a few hours." "I understand. I'll leave detailed instructions with the team." "We don't need to run into each other." "Ben," Catherine hesitated. "Could you stay, at least until Peter wakes up? The other doctors said you're the only one who really understands what happened, who can best evaluate his progress." There was something in her voice, a vulnerability Ben had never seen before in the always composed Catherine. For a moment, he wondered if she was finally beginning to see beyond the facade of perfection she had built around her marriage. "I'll stay until he's out of danger," he finally agreed. "But I'd prefer to avoid a confrontation with Arthur. It wouldn't do anyone any good, especially Peter." The following hours were a constant vigil. Ben monitored Peter's vital signs, checked the CT scans, adjusted medications. The teenager remained in an induced coma, his young body fighting to recover from the trauma. During this time, Ben watched Catherine. The always impeccable wife of Arthur Reed now looked like a shadow of her former self, disheveled hair, deep dark circles, wrinkled clothes. She didn't leave the hospital for a minute, refusing to leave her son's side even when the nurses insisted she rest. In the early hours of the second day after the surgery, as Ben examined Peter's new scans, Catherine broke the silence that had settled between them. "I believed him," she said, almost in a whisper, "because it was easier. Because the alternative was to admit that I spent 15 years with a man I don't really know." Ben looked at her, surprised by the unexpected confession. "Catherine." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued, her eyes fixed on her unconscious son. "I'm just trying to explain. After you left that day, I started noticing things. Small details I'd always ignored. Calls he would take in another room, business trips that were extended without explanation, increasingly elaborate excuses." She took a deep breath, as if every word required enormous effort. But still, I chose to believe him. For Peter, for the image of the perfect family we built, for my own sanity. It's easier to be deceived than to admit you allowed yourself to be deceived for so long. Ben didn't know what to say. Catherine's confession was both a veiled request for understanding and a justification for her actions. "What matters now is Peter," he said finally. "He's going to need stability, support." Catherine nodded, grateful for the change of subject. On the morning of the third day, Peter's parameters began to improve significantly. Ben decided to reduce the sedation, allowing the teenager to gradually emerge from the coma. It was at that moment that Arthur arrived. Ben saw him before he even heard his voice, the imposing figure in the hallway, speaking to nurses as if commanding one of his construction sites. 3 years had passed, but Arthur looked the same. Confident, controlling, accustomed to having his orders obeyed. Ben took a deep breath, preparing himself for the inevitable encounter. For Peter's sake, he would remain civil. "How is he?" Arthur asked, walking into the ICU room without greeting his brother, addressing Catherine directly. "Better," she replied, without getting up from the chair beside her son's bed. "Ben is reducing the sedation. He should start to wake up in the next few hours." Arthur finally looked at his brother, a mixture of discomfort and reluctant gratitude on his face. "Thank you for taking care of him," he said, extending a hand in a formal gesture. Ben accepted the brief handshake, noting how strange the contact felt after so long. "I did what any doctor would do, and what any uncle would do for his nephew. Even so, I'm grateful. I know we haven't spoken in a long time." 3 years, Ben completed. 3 years without knowing anything about my nephew, without being invited to birthdays, graduations, Christmases. Arthur had the decency to look embarrassed. "Things got complicated after that day," he justified. "You were distraught, making accusations. We thought it was best to give it time." "Time," Ben repeated, incredulous. "You completely excluded me from the family because I told the truth about your behavior." "Ben, please," Catherine intervened, looking anxiously at her son. "This is not the time or the place." She was right. Ben took a deep breath, composing himself. "I'm going to check the latest scans," he said, heading for the door. "I'll be back in an hour to assess Peter's vitals." In the hours that followed, Ben kept his distance, entering the room only when necessary, treating Arthur with the professional formality he reserved for the difficult families of patients. The businessman, for his part, seemed relieved by the tacit truce. By the end of that day, Peter began to show the first signs of consciousness, small movements of his fingers, a reaction to the voices around him. Ben monitored him closely, guiding the team on the proper procedures for a gradual awakening. "He's responding well," he explained to the parents. "But we'll still need some tests to assess if there are any neurological side effects." "Side effects?" Arthur repeated, turning pale. "What kind of side effects?" "It's common in cases of traumatic brain injury. There can be changes in memory, motor coordination, behavior. But Peter is young, with a good capacity for recovery. The chances are positive." Catherine held her son's hand, tears streaming silently. "Will he be able to be like he was before? Skateboarding, playing soccer?" "That's what we hope," Ben replied. "But we can only fully assess that when he's completely conscious and we can run the neurological tests." The next morning, Peter opened his eyes. His disoriented gaze scanned the room, landing first on his mother, then his father, and finally on Ben. "Uncle Ben?" he murmured, his voice hoarse from the intubation. Ben's heart leaped. Peter recognized him, remembered him despite the years of separation. It was a good sign, both for the neurological prognosis and for the emotional connection they had always shared. "I'm here, Peter," he replied, moving closer to the bed. "You had an accident, but you're getting better." The teenager nodded weakly, trying to process the information. "My head hurts." "That's normal," Ben explained. "You hit it hard, and we had to do surgery, but the pain will gradually lessen." The following days brought significant progress. Peter was transferred from the ICU to a private room. He began to talk more, to feed himself, to take his first steps with the help of physical therapists. With each evaluation, Ben felt more optimistic about a full recovery. A week after the surgery, an unexpected complication arose. Peter's blood tests showed low hemoglobin levels, requiring a transfusion. "We're going to need his blood type," Ben explained to Catherine and Arthur, who remained constantly by their son's side. "Do you know what it is?" "A positive like mine," Arthur replied promptly. Ben made a note in the chart. "And you, Catherine?" "Oh, negative," she replied, tense. "Right. I'll order the transfusion immediately." Hours later, the hospital lab sent an urgent message to Ben. There was a problem with the blood type. Upon checking the order, he realized the issue. The lab claimed Peter was AB negative, incompatible with what Arthur had reported. "There must be a mistake," Ben commented to the lab technician. "Let's rerun the test." The second test confirmed it. Peter was indeed AB negative. Ben frowned, mentally reviewing the laws of blood heredity he had studied in medical school. A father with type A blood and a mother with type O blood could not produce a child with type AB blood. It was biologically impossible. The conclusion was unavoidable and staggering. Arthur was not Peter's biological father. Ben stood frozen in the hospital lab, the blood test result in his hands like a ticking time bomb. Science didn't lie. Arthur could not be Peter's biological father. This truth, so clear in the blood typing before him, had the power to destroy what was left of the Reed family. For a few moments, Ben considered the ethical implications of what he had just discovered. As a doctor, he had an obligation to scientific truth, but also to the well-being of his patient, who in this case was his nephew, a teenager already fragile from the accident. Peter didn't need another emotional shock during his recovery. After careful reflection, Ben made a decision. He would order the compatible transfusion for Peter without mentioning the genetic incompatibility. This conversation needed to happen, but not now, not in the hospital, not while the boy was fighting to recover. When he returned to Peter's room, Catherine was alone with her son, who was sleeping peacefully. "Where's Arthur?" Ben asked, checking the patient's vitals. "He went to handle some problems at the company," she replied, without taking her eyes off her son. "Even with Peter here, business doesn't stop." There was a note of bitterness in her voice that didn't escape Ben. "The transfusion is being prepared," he informed her, maintaining his professional tone. "We'll start as soon as it's ready." Catherine nodded, continuing to stroke her sleeping son's hair. There was something in her posture, a tension in her back, an almost imperceptible tremor in her hands that suggested to Ben that she might know more than she was letting on. "Catherine," he began, choosing his words carefully, "when the transfusion is over, I'd like to talk with you. In private." She looked up, meeting Ben's gaze with a look that mixed apprehension and resignation. "It's about Peter's tests, isn't it?" "Yes, there are some issues we need to discuss." Catherine closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering her strength. "I understand." "After the transfusion, then?" The transfusion went smoothly. Peter slept through the entire procedure, his young body absorbing the donated blood that would aid his recovery. When it was finished, and the nurses had cleared the equipment, Ben invited Catherine for a talk in the small conference room on that floor. Sitting across from each other, doctor and patient's mother, brother-in-law, and sister-in-law, near strangers after 3 years of distance, they regarded each other in silence for a few seconds. "It's about Peter's blood type, isn't it?" Catherine finally broke the silence, her voice barely audible. Ben nodded, surprised by her perception. "Yes. The tests show Peter is AB negative, Arthur is a positive, and you are O negative. Which means Arthur can't be Peter's biological father," she completed, the words coming out like a long-held confession. Ben watched her closely, noticing there was no surprise on her face, only a profound sadness. "You already knew." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Catherine nodded, silent tears beginning to trace paths down her cheeks. "I've always known," she admitted, her voice choked with emotion. "Since before Peter was born?" "Who?" Ben started but stopped, realizing he had no right to ask that question. Catherine, however, seemed ready to share a secret she had kept for 15 years. "It was one night, just one," she explained, looking down at her hands. "Arthur was traveling as usual. It was our 5th year of marriage, and I already knew about his infidelities, even though I pretended not to. That night I was so lonely, so abandoned." She paused, taking a deep breath to control her emotions. "A colleague from work, Richard, was always there for me, listening, supporting. He was kind when I needed kindness the most. It was just one night, Ben. One night of comfort in years of loneliness. And Arthur never knew? Never. When I found out I was pregnant, I calculated the dates. I knew it couldn't be Arthur's. He was in Portugal when Peter was conceived. I thought about telling the truth, about asking for a divorce, but Arthur was so happy about the news. For the first time in years, I saw the man I had fallen in love with. He changed during the pregnancy. He was present, attentive. I thought a child could save our marriage. And in a way, it did. Ben absorbed every word, mentally recalibrating everything he thought he knew about his brother's family. And this man, Richard, does he know about Peter? Catherine shook her head. He moved to Canada a month later. I never heard from him again. And Peter, Arthur loves him as if he were his own blood. It's the only genuine thing about my husband, the love he has for his son. You never considered telling the truth? Many times, Catherine admitted, especially in recent years when Arthur's infidelities became more frequent, more blatant. But what right did I have to destroy the relationship between a father and son? Peter adores Arthur, always has, and Arthur, with all his faults, has been a present and loving father. Ben then understood the complexity of the situation. What seemed like a simple matter of truth versus lies was, in reality, a tangled web of emotions, compromises, and choices made over many years. I won't tell Arthur, he said finally. It's not my place to reveal this. But Catherine, one day Peter might need to know, for medical reasons if nothing else. I know, she sighed. I always knew this day might come. I just didn't expect it to be now while he's still recovering. It doesn't have to be now, Ben assured her. Peter is recovering well. When he's strong enough to go home, we can revisit this issue. Catherine took Ben's hand, squeezing it with gratitude. Thank you, Ben, for saving my son, for understanding, for not judging. We all make mistakes, Catherine. We all keep secrets. 2 months passed. Peter made a remarkable recovery, exceeding medical expectations. After 3 weeks in the hospital and 5 more of intensive therapy, he was almost completely recovered, with only a slight coordination difficulty that the physical therapists assured would be temporary. During this period, Ben reconnected with his nephew, first as a doctor, then as the uncle Peter remembered fondly from his childhood. The teenager frequently asked why his uncle had distanced himself from the family, but Ben would deflect, saying only that adults complicate things sometimes. Arthur maintained a cordial but distant relationship with Ben. He formally expressed his gratitude for the medical intervention that saved Peter but avoided encounters beyond what was necessary. The businessman still seemed uncomfortable with his brother's presence, as if fearing that old accusations might resurface at any moment. Catherine, on the other hand, actively sought to rebuild bridges. She invited Ben to lunches, asked for advice on Peter's recovery, and gradually began to talk about the years of separation, about how she regretted pushing her brother-in-law away from the family. Peter misses you, she said one afternoon, as they watched the teenager in his physical therapy session. He always asked about you during those years, why Uncle Ben didn't come to parties anymore, why he never called. What did you tell him? Ben asked. That you were very busy saving lives, Catherine replied with a sad smile. It wasn't entirely a lie. Ben's life had also changed. His relationship with Maya had evolved. They were engaged, planning a wedding for the end of the year. The nurse, with her generous nature, fully supported Ben's reconnection with his nephew, even understanding the complexities of the relationship with the rest of the family. One Sunday morning, while having coffee with Maya at a cafe in the West Village, something on television caught Ben's attention. It was an interview on a local news program. The reporter was speaking with a woman with short professional hair wearing an elegant suit on the steps of the New York County Supreme Court. Eliza? Ben murmured, incredulous. On the screen, the caption identified the interviewee, attorney Eliza Hayes, specialist in women's rights. You know her? Maya asked, noticing her fiancé's surprise. Yes. I did, a long time ago. Ben turned up the volume, catching the end of the interview. And this new office project aims to provide free legal support to women in situations of stalking and harassment, Eliza explained, with a confidence that Ben didn't recognize from the frightened florist he had met years ago. Many of them don't report it out of fear, shame, or because they don't have the resources to hire a lawyer. We are here to change that. It's impressive how she turned a traumatic personal experience into something positive, the reporter commented. Eliza's smile wavered for an instant. Sometimes, The worst experiences show us our true strength, she replied, and they direct us toward a greater purpose. When the interview ended, Ben remained silent, absorbing Eliza's transformation. From a stalked florist to a respected attorney, using her own pain to help other women. There was something profoundly inspiring in that. That same night, Ben's phone rang. It was Catherine, her voice trembling with anxiety. "Ben, I need to tell you something." "It's about Arthur." "What happened?" "He saw the same interview you did. That woman, Eliza. He's become obsessed. He's researching her online. Found out she moved back to New York 3 months ago. I'm worried, Ben. He's acting just like he did back then." A chill ran down Ben's spine. "Did he say anything? Do anything?" "Not yet, but I know that look. It's like he's planning something. And there's more." "What?" "Peter and I found a search history on his computer. It wasn't just women like Eliza he stalked over the years. There were others, Ben. Many others." The revelation didn't surprise Ben as much as it should have. Somehow, he had always known the affair with Eliza wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern. "Catherine, you and Peter need to get away from him." "It's not that simple. You know Arthur. He controls everything. Our bank accounts, the house we live in, even Peter's school." "You can stay with us," Ben offered without hesitation. Maya wouldn't mind. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Thank you, Ben. I'll think about it. For now, I'm keeping an eye on him. If I notice he's planning to do anything against Eliza, I'll let you know immediately." In the days that followed, Ben found himself torn between his concern for Catherine and Peter and the need to warn Eliza of the potential danger. After much reflection, he decided the attorney had the right to know her former stalker was active again. It wasn't hard to find the law firm where Eliza worked. A small plaque in Midtown Manhattan announced Hayes & Associates, Advocacy for Women. When Ben entered the simple but elegant reception area, he was greeted by a young secretary. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Eliza Hayes, please." "Tell her it's Ben Reed." The secretary looked at him curiously. "Ms. Hayes is in a meeting. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's an urgent matter, personal." While he waited in the reception, Ben looked at the photos on the walls. Eliza at her law school graduation, receiving awards, standing beside groups of women at events. In one of the photos, something caught his eye. Eliza smiling next to a young boy of about 6, with dark hair and penetrating eyes that looked strangely familiar. "Ben?" The voice made him turn. Eliza was standing in her office doorway, more mature than he remembered, but with the same determined gaze. "Eliza," he smiled, genuinely happy to see her. "Sorry to drop in without an appointment." She invited him into her office, an organized space, with shelves full of law books and a window overlooking the bustling city center. "I saw you on TV," he began, sitting in the chair she indicated. "I was impressed with your work, from florist to attorney." Eliza smiled, sitting behind her desk. "Life takes many turns, doesn't it? After I left New York, I realized I wanted to do more than just sell flowers. I wanted to help women who went through what I went through. So I used my savings to go to law school in Chicago." "It's admirable," Ben said sincerely, "turning a painful experience into something so positive." Eliza's smile faded slightly. "I imagine you didn't come all the way here just to compliment me, Ben. What happened?" Ben hesitated, searching for the best way to break the news. "Arthur saw your interview on TV," he said finally. "And from what Catherine told me, he's interested in you again, researching your life, your work." Eliza's face paled, but her posture remained firm. "I see," she said, her voice controlled. "Thank you for letting me know. I will take the necessary precautions. Eliza, if you need anything..." She held up a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not that scared florist anymore, Ben. Now I know my rights. I know how to protect myself legally." At that moment, the office door opened and the same boy from the photo ran in. "Mommy, Aunt Rita said I can have another cookie?" Eliza smiled at her son, an expression of pure love lighting up her face. "Just one more. Miles, and then homework." The boy made a comical face, then noticed Ben's presence. "Hello," he said politely. "Are you my mom's client?" "Miles, this is Dr. Reed, an old friend," Eliza introduced them, with an almost imperceptible hesitation. Ben smiled at the boy, again noticing the unsettling familiarity in his features. The eyes, the shape of the chin. "A pleasure to meet you, Miles. How old are you?" 6.5, the boy replied proudly. "Almost 7. Ben did a quick mental calculation. 6.5. Meaning Miles was conceived approximately 7 years and 3 months ago. Exactly the time when Eliza met Arthur. His eyes met Eliza's, a silent question hanging between them. She held his gaze for a moment, then turned to her son. "Miles, why don't you go finish your drawing in Aunt Rita's room while I talk with Dr. Reed?" When the boy left, Ben didn't need to ask the question aloud. Eliza answered the unspoken query. "Yes, Miles is your brother's son," she confirmed, her voice low but steady. "I found out I was pregnant 2 months after I left New York. I thought about not having the baby, but I couldn't. Does Arthur know?" "No, and I prefer it stays that way." "He has a right to know he has a son," Ben argued, more out of principle than conviction. "Rights?" Eliza gave a bitter laugh. "The man who stalked me, who destroyed my business, who forced me to leave my life behind, that man has no rights to my child." "Our son," Eliza continued, "has a father, my husband, Andre. He legally adopted Miles when we got married. Miles has a loving, stable family. He doesn't need Arthur's toxicity in his life." Ben nodded slowly, understanding her position. "I understand. And I respect your decision." "Thank you." Eliza visibly relaxed. "Now about the warning. I'll take precautionary measures. If Arthur tries anything, I'll be on your side," Ben assured her. "I won't let him hurt you again. Not you, and not Miles." The weeks following the meeting with Eliza were tense. Ben was torn between the hospital, the preparations for his wedding to Maya, visits to Peter, and constant vigilance over Arthur's actions. Catherine kept him informed of her brother's movements, reporting with growing concern the obsession he had developed for the attorney. "He printed out every article about her," Catherine told Ben over lunch. "He has a file on his computer just with information about her office, the cases she's defended. Yesterday, I caught him studying the routine of the building where she works." "This is getting dangerous," Ben observed, concern evident on his face. "You and Peter should seriously consider the offer to stay with us for a while." Catherine played with the food on her plate, undecided. "Peter is 15, Ben. He's at a crucial phase in school. A move right now would affect his studies, his friends, and staying in a house with Arthur in this state doesn't affect him." She sighed, exhaustion visible in every line of her face. "You're right. I'll talk to Peter today." That same afternoon, while Ben was in a routine consultation, his secretary interrupted him urgently. "Dr. Reed, your sister-in-law is on the line. She says it's extremely urgent." When he picked up, Catherine's voice was laden with panic. "Ben," he found out, Arthur went to Eliza's office. He confronted her in front of everyone, made a horrible scene. And worse, he saw Miles. Ben's heart leaped. "What happened?" "I don't know exactly. I just know Arthur came back completely unhinged. He looked at the boy and—" "Ben," he realized. "He said the kid has the same eyes, the same chin he had as a child. Where is he now?" "Locked in his study, drinking. I'm scared, Ben, the look in his eyes. I've never seen Arthur like this." "Take Peter to our place right now," Ben instructed. "Maya will be there. I'm going to try to talk to Eliza, see exactly what happened." After several attempts, he managed to reach Eliza. Her voice was tense but controlled. "He just showed up," she reported. "Started screaming, accusing me of ruining his life. When he saw Miles leaving my office, Ben, he looked at my son like he'd seen a ghost." "Did he try anything against you?" "He tried to get near the car where Miles was waiting. I used pepper spray on him. I had no choice. I called the police, filed a report. My lawyer is preparing a restraining order." "Are you and Miles safe?" "Yes, we're at a friend's house. Andre is flying back from his trip to be with us." "Ben, I've been thinking, after all this." "What?" "I'm not the only one, you know? After I became a lawyer, I met other women who went through the same thing with your brother. I'm considering a class action lawsuit for harassment, stalking." The news hit Ben like a punch. Other women, a pattern of behavior that stretched back years, maybe decades. "How many?" he asked, his voice almost failing. 5 so far, all with similar stories. Arthur would court them, usually in professional contexts. When it ended, or he was rejected, the stalking and defamation would begin. Ben closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the revelation. "What can I do to help?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Would you be willing to testify? To tell what you saw that day 7 years ago? As a witness, your testimony would carry a lot of weight. A respected doctor, with no personal interest in the case?" "Of course," Ben replied without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." Events snowballed in the following weeks. The case gained traction in the local media. Prominent developer accused of stalking by 6 women. Arthur's company began to lose contracts. Investors pulled out. The carefully constructed image of the exemplary businessman crumbled with every new detail revealed. Catherine and Peter moved temporarily into Ben and Maya's apartment. The teenager, still recovering from his accident, showed increasing signs of stress from the situation. "I hate what's happening," Peter confided in his uncle during a physical therapy session. "The kids at school look at me differently. Some parents won't let their kids hang out with me. Like it's my fault what my dad did." "You're not to blame for anything, Peter," Ben assured him. "And this will pass. People will forget." "But I won't forget," the teenager replied, tears in his eyes. "I'll never be able to forget that he's that kind of man." Ben hugged his nephew, his heart breaking for the boy who was innocently paying for his father's mistakes. On the eve of the trial, Peter disappeared. Catherine called Ben in a panic. The teenager hadn't come home from school. His things were gone from his room, along with some cash and his handheld game console. A frantic search began. Ben, Maya, and Catherine scoured places Peter frequented. They called friends, teachers. Nothing. It was only at dusk that Ben had an idea. The small cabin the Reed family kept up in the Catskills, a mountain town an hour from NYC, where Peter used to vacation as a child. Driving up the winding road to the town, Ben tried to imagine what was going on in his nephew's head. The disappointment with his father, the public exposure of his family, the constant stress at home. It was too much for any teenager, especially one still recovering from physical trauma. The cabin was dark when he arrived, but the porch door was unlocked. In the back room, he found Peter huddled on the bed, headphones isolating him from the world. "Everyone is worried about you," Ben said softly after his nephew removed the headphones. "Sorry," Peter murmured. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't stand watching Mom cry every night. I couldn't stand Dad's messages, one minute begging for forgiveness, the next blaming Mom for taking sides against him. "You could have talked to me. What good would it do?" "You can't fix this, Uncle Ben. No one can. Our family is destroyed." Ben sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. "Families change, Peter. Sometimes they break, sometimes they reform. The important thing is that there are people who love you, who care about you. Your mom, me, Maya." Peter looked up, his eyes red from crying. "I want to live with you," he declared, his voice suddenly firm. "I don't want to go back home, not now, not after the trial. I don't want to be near him. That's a serious decision. I'm 15. I can already choose who I want to live with. And I choose you and Maya." The trial was as difficult as Ben had imagined. Sitting on the witness stand, he recounted in detail what he had witnessed 7 years ago. Arthur stalking Eliza, the intimidation, the veiled threats, the defamation that followed. He described how his brother had orchestrated his estrangement from the family when he tried to expose the truth. Arthur, sitting next to his lawyer, maintained an impassive expression, avoiding looking directly at his brother. Catherine testified next, corroborating her husband's controlling and manipulative behavior pattern. The 6 women, led by Eliza, presented overwhelming evidence, threatening messages, witnesses to the harassment, records of stalking. One of them, a former secretary from the development company, bore emotional scars so deep she could barely speak in Arthur's presence. After 3 days of testimony, the judge announced his decision. Arthur was sentenced to 3 years in prison, in a work release program, in addition to paying restitution to the victims, and a permanent restraining order. The sentence was met with a mixture of relief and sadness by Ben. Watching his brother be handcuffed and led out of the courtroom didn't bring the satisfaction he might have imagined, only the confirmation that the family rift was complete and irreversible. As the officers led Arthur away, Catherine approached her now ex-husband. Ben couldn't hear what she said, but he saw Arthur's expression transform. First confusion, then shock, and finally a visceral pain that contorted his features. Later, Catherine would tell him what she had said in her last moments with Arthur. "He needed to know the truth about Peter," she explained, her voice heavy with a mix of guilt and liberation. That the son he loved so much, the only human being he seemed capable of feeling genuine love for, was not biologically his. That was cruel, Ben observed, no judgment in his voice. "Yes," Catherine admitted, "as cruel as he was to all those women, as cruel as he was to me for 15 years. I needed him to feel at least a fraction of the pain he caused." Her exit from the courtroom was surreal. reporters captured the moment when Catherine, after revealing the truth to Arthur, began to laugh. A laugh that was at first restrained, but grew until it became almost hysterical as she walked alone through the courthouse corridors. 2 days later, Catherine was found at home, in a catatonic state, mumbling incoherently. The emotional breakdown, doctors explained, was the result of years of contained psychological stress, now released by the case's resolution. She was hospitalized for psychiatric treatment with an expected release in a few weeks. Temporary custody of Peter was granted to Ben without contest. The teenager adapted surprisingly well to his new life in the apartment, with his uncle and his now Aunt Maya. He returned to school, resumed physical therapy, and slowly began to smile again. "I think this is the first time I've seen you genuinely happy in months," Ben commented, watching his nephew laugh at one of Maya's jokes during dinner. "It's because here I can just be myself," Peter replied simply. "I don't have to pretend everything is okay. I don't have to protect anyone." 3 months after the trial, with Catherine recovered and actively participating in her son's life, though living separately, Ben received a message from Eliza. "Miles has been asking a lot of questions about his biological family. I think it's time he met relatives other than the father he chose for himself. Would you and Peter like to meet us this weekend?" The meeting took place in a park along the East River on a sunny Sunday morning. Peter, initially nervous about meeting a half-brother he never knew existed, was quickly charmed by the spirited Miles. Despite the age difference, 15 and 7, the two discovered common interests in video games and adventure stories. "He has your smile," Eliza observed, sitting next to Ben on a bench as they watched the boys play. "And my mother's eyes," Ben completed. "It's incredible how genetics work, isn't it? 2 children, sons of the same man, raised in completely different environments, and yet they share little gestures, expressions." "I'm glad Peter has you," Eliza said, watching the teenager teach Miles how to fly a small drone. "All children deserve adults who love them unconditionally." Ben nodded, a sense of peace washing over him for the first time in years. "You know what's ironic?" he reflected. "Arthur, with all his obsession for control and appearances, ended up being the catalyst for something beautiful. If it weren't for him, for his actions, his terrible choices, we never would have met. These boys never would have found each other." "From darkness, sometimes light is born," Eliza mused. "That's what I've learned in these years. That even from the worst experiences, new paths can emerge, new possibilities." Watching the 2 boys play under the New York sun, Ben couldn't help but think how unpredictable life was. 7 years ago, exhausted after a long shift, he had been approached by a desperate florist, a coincidence that would forever change the course of several lives, breaking old bonds and creating new ones. Peter and Miles were now laughing loudly, running around a large tree, the drone momentarily forgotten. Half-brothers who had just met, but who already showed a connection that transcended lost time and the complex circumstances of their kinship. "They're going to be okay," Ben affirmed, more to himself than to Eliza. "Yes," she agreed, her face lit by a serene smile. "They're going to be better than okay. They'll grow up knowing that family isn't just about blood or a last name. It's choice. It's love. It's being present in the hard times." Ben reached out, taking Eliza's hand briefly in a gesture of gratitude and mutual understanding. Not as the start of something romantic. They had both moved on, built full lives with people they loved, but as the recognition of a shared journey of wounds that, though scarred, had fundamentally transformed who they were. "To our sons," Ben said, looking at Peter and Miles, "and to the new families we built from the ruins of the past." Eliza squeezed his hand in response, her eyes shining with contained emotion. "To our sons," she repeated, "and to second chances." Friends and listeners, we hope the story of Ben, Eliza, and their families has touched your hearts. Sometimes, the strongest bonds are born from the most painful experiences, and the truest families are the ones we choose to build, regardless of the blood that runs in our veins. If you were moved by this journey of redemption and new beginnings, be sure to subscribe to our channel to follow other equally engaging stories. Leave your like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is essential for us to keep bringing content that makes a difference. And remember, for every story that comes to an end, there is always a new chapter waiting to be written. Until next time.